This year, LG waited a little bit longer to release its latest G series smartphone to make sure that it had the latest Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chip in there. But is it going to be enough to sway Samsung users away from their precious Galaxies? What's going on, guys? Ricky here from GSM Arena. Now let's take a first look at the LG G7 ThinQ. So you're probably wondering what this ThinQ branding is. And this is LG's smart home appliance branding. It's a way for LG to bridge the gap between home appliances and its smartphones. Kind of like how Samsung has the SmartThings ecosystem. It would have been enough to say that the phone was ThinQ compatible, but LG went all in with the branding and called it the ThinQ right off the bat. The LG G7 has an attractive design. It feels good in the hand, it's attractive enough, but there are many glass sandwiches these days. And the problem with this glass sandwich design is anyone that you hold just feels fragile. LG has assured us that the G7 is built to mil-spec compliance. It has a magnesium frame with I-beam construction, which would dissipate any sudden shock from drops throughout the chassis. Just keep in mind that this does not guarantee shatter resistance. At the end of the day, glass is still glass. There is a new button placement and there's a new button. The power key has been reassigned from the rear of the device to the side of the device. And the rear button is just a fingerprint scanner now. So there's only a fingerprint scanner. You can wake the phone up with the new power key as well. So there is a new button right below the volume rocker, and it will be a shortcut for Google Assistant. Now, LG told us that this will not be programmable, but down the line, it might add some additional functionalities to it that are specific to LG phones. On the front, there is a 6.1-inch full vision screen, a bit taller than the V30's 18:9 aspect ratio, to accommodate for that notch, which we'll get to in a second. LG is using the M+ LCD display on the G7. It's the first type of display that LG's put on a smartphone. It's got 4 colors per pixel. It's got red, green, and blue, the RGB, and then the W stands for white. It doesn't require as much backlight for the same amount of brightness as a regular LCD, which promises 35% more power efficiency over traditional RGB and provides sharper images as a result. LG promises 1,000 nits of brightness in direct sunlight, and we're excited to test this in our review. Now let's get back to this notch. LG is calling it the new second screen in the settings. You can turn it on, you can turn it off, you can customize it, you can change the background. But it doesn't make sense for LG to call this a new second screen since it doesn't resemble any of the functions from the V10 and the V20's secondary screen, which was all by itself and it was OLED. LG could theoretically make the notch area act like a secondary screen from the V20, but it would require OLED in order to be practical and power efficient, so it doesn't have to illuminate the entire screen just to illuminate that area. Still, if you missed the secondary screen, LG's provided the floating bar that it introduced with the LG V30 last year. For those worrying about the headphone jack, LG's is not going anywhere. It's still here. Quad DAC has been a major selling point of its smartphones, and it would be not a good idea for LG to get rid of it at this point. There are vast customization options like equalizer and audio effects for both the Quad DAC and the speaker. Speaking of which, these are LG's Boombox speakers. They're dual loudspeakers, stereo speakers on an LG flagship, and they support Dolby DTX, which can simulate up to 7.1 surround sound. So let's talk about the cameras. There are two 16-megapixel cameras. LG has decided to keep the ultra-wide camera, and it should because it is a differentiating factor from other smartphones that don't offer such a wide degree camera. Now, both cameras are now calibrated though, so the wide camera can capture depth information and do the portrait mode that everyone else has been doing. The new camera UI can recognize food, people, and even objects with its new ThinQ scene recognition, and it all works offline. It also does give suggestions for camera modes, so if it senses a big group of people you're trying to take a picture of, it may suggest that you switch to the wide camera. There's a new low light mode on the G7. What it does is it uses 4 pixels to capture the light for one single pixel. So it's going to take that 16 megapixel image and it's going to shrink it down to a 4 megapixel image. LG says that this mode kicks in at environments of 2 lux or less, which is actually pretty dark. To give you an idea, about less light than from a single candle. The front 8 megapixel also does scene and object recognition and can recognize up to 5 faces, which comes into play with portrait mode, which is also here but done completely by software since there is no second camera to help with depth perception. In the US, the phone will have 4 GB of RAM and 64 gigs of internal storage, which you can expand with a micro SD card. So what do you think of the LG G7 ThinQ? What do you think of the name? What do you think of the phone? Do you like the hardware? Do you like the notch? Let us know what you think. Leave a comment down below. And I'm Ricky signing off for GSM Arena. Thanks for watching.